Rugby get any crazier than this? I really don't know, because that's how the results seem to be going. What we'll do this evening, we'll have a quick chat about some of the stuff that's going on. Obviously, we've got some Flowgate and stuff that Crusaders been going on. So we'll just touch on those. We won't go into that in any depth. Plus, we'll mainly be looking at how we see Super Rugby finishing this season. So I'll be sharing a screen with all of the games that are coming up, and we'll run through every single game, giving you our expectation as to how many points each team will get out of those games, i.e. bonus points and wins and losses and all of that stuff. And to join me doing that, I have the one, the only, the guy who bought me this jersey. Stephen, how you doing, sir?
Very good. Once again, privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM. And listen, Saturday night was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Apart from if you're a Chiefs supporter, so maybe the one of three Blues supporters that were in the Zone Sports Bar probably would have been pleased with the result.
Well, yes, that's very true. I think then everyone else was not so happy with the result. But hey, I got a Blues jersey. I'm a Blues supporter at the end of the day, so it was a good result from that point of view, but not so much from my audience, which was what I was kind of more worried about on Saturday night, to be honest. But there we go. So hopefully we've also got John O'Connor to join us, but he was having some technical issues dialing in. So we'll see if he manages to join us on the show or not. But it's good to have him back yet again. So yes, let's touch off on these things just because they are the hot topics at the moment. But Folau, so he has officially been fired, or his contract has officially been ripped up, as it were.
Yep, that he has. But you just sense that now. Listening ahead, I think it was about 72 hours to basically appeal, and obviously nothing heard. So you just you think this is probably going to go to the barristers. I would imagine. I'm hearing stories that he's hired a QC, so he's obviously going to go after Australian rugby.
Yeah,
so they're in for some tough times, Paul.
Yeah, I think so. He came out and said that he didn't trust he would get a fair hearing on that. That's why he didn't appeal. Now, whether that's I guess it's supposedly an independent panel, but it is appointed by Rugby Australia, so I guess. And so far they have every time they found against him. So I can see where he's coming from in that one, why he might be feeling that way. But yeah, I'd have thought he would have appealed first and then gone to court instead of going straight to court. But there you go. These things unfortunately do happen, and I do think we're going to be heading that way. And then to follow things up, we have a whole bunch of Crusaders players, or 3, I think is the number, who drank a bit too much, and then various reports of pinching a woman's bottom and then homophobic slurs in a fast food joint late at night. Not very clever from the Crusaders players by any stretch of the imagination, really, is it?
No, well, I thought times had changed, that you'd go out, play a game of footy, have a few beers, and then end up at McDonald's. I thought those times were sort of 20 odd years ago, or long before the days of professional rugby. From what I believe, I'll kind of break this down, and of course, there's not a lot of information. All this is alleged at this stage, although Richie Moore has already come out and made some sort of a apology, so that's not an admission to have actually done something. I don't know what is. And
I think, but hang on. His apology says, "I drank too much. I can't remember what happened." So he it's kind of, it may or may not have happened as far as he knows.
Yeah, he's obviously put the excuse out there first.
Yes.
Gee whiz. What is concerning is the guy that they've made the homophobic slurs about is actually, if he's got some sort of evidence. Well, I hate to say it, but these lads should well and truly get their butts kicked in this day and age. They really should know better. But like I say, a lot of this is alleged at this stage. But what I find a bit strange, I do believe there was they mentioned they had a security services guy with them. Now, is that a security guy that's hired from wherever they're staying, or is this their own guy? Because if it's their own guy, he'd be the first guy I'd sack.
Well, yes, that's true. And actually, good evening, John. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing, sir?
Morning, boys.
Good. And as our South African expert, you can tell us: do you need a security guy to go out in the evening in wherever the Crusaders were in South Africa to get McDonald's?
Cape Town.
And I thought the security guy went with to keep the South Africans safe from the angry, violent New Zealand rugby players. Isn't that
Well, he did his job then, didn't he? They stayed safe from
dangerous, testosterone carrying, steroid-driven, roid rage, whatever? Let's introduce all the, all the cliches that we possibly can about over-exercised, over-doped, over-sexed, hyper-alert, super aggressive, insert name here. Isn't that what he's there for?
Can we just say the word allegedly amongst all that before I get sued? My channel ends up being bankrupt.
I knew there was something that I'd left out there. Well, I think that most sporting teams these days, when they're on tour, have a security expert with them. I don't think that it's restricted just to South Africa and addressing situations about possible muggings or things like that. I think it's got more to do with the climate that we're living in, going as far back as, what was it, 07, 09, when the bus was shot up with the Sri Lankan team. And from that time, I think most professional organizations have a security, if not a full detail, at least a security advisor that's with them when they're on tour. It makes sense. I remember the first time I visited Auckland, I walked back from the waterfront to the city centre by Sky City at about 2:30 in the morning, and people thought I was crazy. They said, "How can you do that? That's not safe." I thought, being the South African, I thought I was the danger, but they told me, "No, you weren't." So, you don't know what you don't know in any particular city. I think it would probably be helpful in the early hours of the morning if you've got a security officer with you that can, point out where's it. But this occurred in Cape Town, right?
Yes.
Oh no, I don't know where.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, yes.
Well, they played the Stormers, so I'm assuming it's Cape Town.
Well, it's unlikely to be Johannesburg if they played the Stormers a couple of hours beforehand. But the Cape Town city centre is actually quite safe. The Cape Town city centre, probably 10, 15 years ago, they installed a massive amount of cameras around the whole city, which are monitored continually. And they basically reclaimed the city centre from petty criminals, right? So of the city centres in South Africa, Cape Town is really safe. They've got like a command centre, kind of like what the British do, the George Orwell type 1984 London city centre. What you looking at there, Paul? Where everything is. I mean, you watch these procedural things, these British procedural cop dramas, and there's, according to them, there's a camera watching you wherever you go. So
absolutely, you can track people now through all these cameras. There are a lot of them around, particularly in the UK. And which goes back to sort of various terrorist things that happened with the IRA, followed by other terrorist activity that's happened since then, unfortunately.
That's what they're there for. Right?
Yep.
So Cape Town is obviously, if there was going to be some kind of terrorist incident, Cape Town is obviously a world-renowned city. So all sort of security issues around that, just like most of these major potential target cities are in the world, unfortunately. So it would make sense to have a security officer with them, right, or a security advisor. I think it would be very helpful if he is going to back up their story that he's not an employee of the Crusaders. If he's a South African security officer working for whatever company has been contracted, and he backs their story up, that's hugely helpful. And here's the thing, guys. You you cannot stop people from approaching sportsmen, right? Unless you want them to live in some kind of hermetically sealed ivory tower, right? You cannot ask them to have a normal kind of life and not be approached. So I posted on Facebook this weekend. We were at a club game here in Hamilton, and I was with my son, and we were supporting a family friends. Their daughter was playing, and she's made a debut in the Premier League for the women's team, and she's only 16, so we're supporting them. And there is our favorite New Zealand rugby player, Stacey Walker. And so we went up and spoke to her. We had a photograph. She was wonderful. She's a complete credit to New Zealand, to the Black Ferns, and to rugby as a sport. But you can't expect these sportsmen to have a normal life and cut them off from the world, right? If they want to go out and get McDonald's, they're young, they're mid-20s, they're in a foreign city, they've just played a rugby game, it takes hours to come off that high, and they go out and get food. You can't stop people from approaching them. So one of the primary principles of having that security officer there is to back them up, right?
Yep.
Is to be able to back them up in this kind of situation. Yes, to get between them and if something escalates, right? And to provide some guidance there, but also to give them some witness support, right? That's one of the functions that security officer will do. So you'll advise, look, don't go in that area. That's a better place to go. I know the city, whatever the story might be, but also to protect them and to protect them after the fact. So, we're very much in a culture at the moment of hot takes. Everybody's got to have a hot take on everything. Everybody's got to have an opinion, an instantaneous opinion on everything, right? So the old principles of good journalism where you actually report on something that's factual. We don't just go by hearsay. We have second
corroboration and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You have corroboration. You have backup. You have proof. You have background. Whatever. No, it's just at the moment. It's just I'm hearing that, right?
Yeah.
I'm hearing that, and blah 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 blah. Insert clickbait here, right? And that's what we're seeing at the moment. Some of these Crusaders organization rocked. I thought, what's going on here? I open it up. I go, somebody's accused them of doing something. They vehemently deny it. Why is that rocking the whole organization? They rock the organization if they're found to have done it. And there's multiple incidences across the whole organization, and there's some kind of systemic problem there, right? But I clicked. I fell for it. I clicked on that headline.
They got the click, eh? That was what they were after.
So let's refuse to take the bait, and let's say, wait, let us see how this thing plays out. Let's see what the proof is, and let's not react from some kind of visceral. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that was going to say, and also the as I say, there's a couple of differences here. One is that look, people criticise Australian rugby for being so slow around the Folau thing. I'm like, no, they followed due process and went about it the right kind of way. And you're absolutely right. We need to now wait on this one to see, let due process take its course, and people who are calling for these guys to be, if anyone's calling these guys to be sort of fired or stuff, that's way over the top. At this stage, let's wait and see what the facts are, how the union deals with it, and also the difference here, I think, is clearly these guys are apologising already, so they realise that they've. Whereas in the Folau case, there isn't an apology. He thinks he's not actually done anything wrong. So people who want to have a second chance and realise they've done wrong, then you give them another chance as well. Stephen, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was. I was up early this morning and I had TVNZ on, or the state-owned broadcaster on, and I think John Campbell, who is ex-TV3, has now joined TV1 Breakfast. And of course, I think the second headline off the rink was about the Crusaders, and John Campbell brought the story up and he says, well, we're heading to so-and-so, at the airport just to see what's happening. Then they got to a guy at the airport, and he goes, "Oh well," looks around and goes, "No, the Crusaders haven't arrived at this stage, but yeah, nothing at this stage. But back to you, John." And I thought to myself, seriously? The state-owned broadcaster sent a resource out to the airport, so he's standing there waiting for the Crusaders to come in, and nothing's happened. Really and truthfully, is that what our journalism is all about? You shook my head, and I think you guys have pretty much both summed it up. Until we hear more, it's probably not really worth going there.
Yeah, talk to us. I mean, this kind of thing that we talk about. Oh, we're going to blow this up, and we're going to, this is the dark side of the 24-hour news cycle that CNN started 35 years ago, right? Where every hour on the hour we've got to report something, right? And if we just keep on saying the same things over and over again, we start to look a little silly, right? So let's tweak it. Let's make it a little bit more jazzy. Let's make it a little bit more entertaining. Let's get some talking head in that will sit and pontificate and say how absolutely shockingly, terribly horrible this thing is, and I'm appalled. I'm appalled, right?
No, I'm appalled. You're a John.
That's right. I'm a John. And he's a Stephen. He's a Stephen, right? And why do we need to be appalled? And I think the Israel Folau situation is a perfect example. I sent you guys a very well-written article, came out last week in the Sydney Morning Herald, which pointed out the litany of absolutely shocking things that Wallaby rugby and league players have done over the last X number of years, right? All of whom were allowed to continue playing rugby. Yes, somebody has expressed an opinion for which he is not apologetic, right? Which he believes is the truth, which he believes is part of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of his religion. But in every other way, his behavior has been exemplary, as an example in the sport, right? Why was it necessary to be so appalled? Why could they not, right at the beginning, just, if this is how they felt, issue a press statement and say, we do not hold with the views of Israel Folau. That is not our view as an organization. However, we live in a country where freedom of expression is enshrined in our constitution or in our laws, as is freedom of religion. And therefore, we may not agree with him, but we live in a country where you are free to express these things. We differ in opinion, but we don't have to kill each other and be differing in opinion, right? You don't have to put that in your press statement. Basically, we don't agree with him, but you know what? This is a free country and he is free to express those opinions. End of story. All of this would have gone away. All of this would have gone away. There would have been, oh, how can you should have reacted, we should have reacted. And they could have said, yes, that is your opinion. And we defend your right to express your opinion, right? And within a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, the whole thing would have been gone, right? But now they are rolling and they are rolling and they are rolling in it.
Yep, they are.
And instead of this appalled culture that everything is appalling, or a Johning or a Stephen, whatever.
Yeah, no, this and I think the one that forced their hand on this one was the fact that Qantas, one of their major sponsors, decided that they weren't and part of that they weren't happy with it, and that they weren't going to put up with, and therefore and one of the things we've talked about on this show before is how that how players aren't really paid to play rugby anymore. They're paid to be walking billboards, and the best way to get people to look at them is to play rugby. And basically, and that's and the people who are putting their name on that billboard are the people who actually pay the bills, and they've said that they don't like it. So that's I think that's why that one's gone the way. But you're right.
Well, Sorry, Paul, I interrupted you, Karen.
But you're right about the list of when you compare someone saying something like that to someone who is active in dogfighting, who has beaten up their spouse, who has been involved in drug dealing, and these are all the cases. These are all the kind of cases that were in the Sydney Morning Herald as to things that the rugby players have done and not had and not had their contracts ripped up. So the now the how you can get involved in something like dogfighting and then be, oh, I'm sorry, I was involved in it. So how can you not know that's wrong in the first place? How can you not know buying and selling cocaine is wrong, and you still have a career? So it's strange that sponsors are happy to be associated with someone who's done that, but are not happy with someone who's made a point. And I can see that differentiation is to me is wrong. I personally have no issue with Folau having his contract ripped up, but I can see the point that these other people shouldn't also be in the game.
Well, first off, I want to back up what you're saying, because I reached out to my contacts in the, let's call it the rugby reporting world, right? And off the record, so that's why I'm not going to mention where I heard this from, but off the record, I just reached out and said, what are you hearing? What's your opinion? What's that? And what I heard back is that it's absolutely being driven by Qantas. So this decision is being taken at the behest, or is being driven by a sponsor. So on a sheer principle level, when your sponsor starts to drive the decisions on how you direct your sport, you are in deep trouble, right? And I'm not simply talking about this issue, I'm talking generally. If you're starting to make decisions around the future of your sport and which direction you're taking according to who is supplying you with the money, then you're in deep trouble, first of all, right? Secondly, and here I'm going to say this very carefully, right? The reason also why the person who is involved in dogfighting, and by the way, Michael Vick, renowned quarterback in North America, right, in the NFL, right, went to prison for dogfighting, didn't just get his contract torn up, spent 2.5 years in prison for dogfighting, right? The reason why the dogfighter and the cocaine dealer and all of this, why they are not getting their contract torn up, is because dogs don't have a voice, right? And the people who get enslaved in drugs and suffer from it are not jumping up and down and saying, sort him out, he must pay a price, right? But the people that are being spoken about in Israel Folau's post are saying that they're unhappy. And we are in this environment, and I'm not saying that I will fight for the right of a homosexual to say they don't agree and they think that's out of line, right? That's freedom of speech. But the point is, we're in the society where if somebody shouts loud enough, then we can't take any controversy, right? We can't seem to have this ability to have opposing views, have differences of opinion, and carry on living together, even though we have differences of opinion, right? And unfortunately, the dogs aren't jumping up and down, and the drug addicts are not jumping up and down. And so therefore, these guys, because they have value, because they have talent, and that's what it's come down to. They have gone, here is the value of Israel Folau to us as an organization. And on the other hand, here is the value of the sponsorship that we get. And this is worth more to us than Israel Folau and the talent and the difference that he makes to the Wallabies. And that's their decision. That's what they've taken.
Yeah, it is. I will disagree on one point about this idea that as soon as you allow the money to or sponsors to say the direction of your sport, you're in trouble. Because I think that in all sports, the money has sway as to the direction that the that the sport takes, whether now to a greater or lesser degree. I think one of the ones that's happened, for example, in baseball is the players used to spit a lot on the mound when they were up to bat. People disliked that, and so the sponsor said, "Look, stop all the players from spitting." And so eventually they stopped the players from spitting, because again, from a sponsor and fans, because they pay the money, and that's where that's where it came from. So I think there are degrees. Now, obviously, in your opinion, this one has gone further than it should do. To me, I think that it happens all the time that sponsors drive, and the money drives where a sport goes to. So let's say we'll just
because it's happened elsewhere, Paul. Just because it's happened elsewhere, that doesn't logically mean that it's okay, right? Just because this is a repeating pattern in sport around the world, right, doesn't mean that those other sports have not suffered and had consequences for it, right?
Yep.
And look, I abhor spitting, right, in public like that. Of course, it's not cool. But I still don't think, even though it might take away something that I don't like, spitting on the mound, I still don't think it should be driven by sponsors. It should be driven by some consultation with the players' union and saying, listen, fellas, right, let's just talk about this. Not a great look, right? So let's come to some kind of agreement here. Let's work on this together. Not you're going to do this because otherwise we're going to lose money, right? Because, yeah, anyway, this is a very deep, in-depth philosophical discussion. But we are, for me, I've seen the transformation of cricket, for instance, as the money behind certain sections of cricket has just driven it in certain directions that have not been for the good of the game, right? And we've taken decisions that have not been in the interest of the sport, right? And this is the thing. If money is your driver, then any threat to the money, and you're going to start making decisions based on the fear of losing it. And that's always trouble. In the long run, you might lose out on the spitting, but somewhere around the line, it's going to bite you in the backside.
I get what you're saying. It's not always and you're making it. You're taking it to be when you talk about the money here. What you'll take it's not just sponsors, but also we look in the UK, for example, at the owners and chasing money in like the Viva Premiership in the top 14, where there's been a detrimental to the French national team by going out and buying players from overseas and things like that. So. So you're not just purely talking about money as a whole, rather than just from a sponsor's point of view.
Yeah. Look, money is the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not every evil, and it's not money in itself. But once you start, like, we got to have it. Oh, and now Qantas is going to take their money away, all right? Basically, what you've said, what the Australian Rugby Union have said is, in Australia, our sport has a price.
And all sports do, unfortunately, to a greater or lesser degree, unless the amateur game, like the GAA, is an island where they can.
Sorry to interrupt you, Paul. Do you think, Steve, that the rugby in New Zealand has a price? Do you think it's reached that stage?
We had a situation on our own doorstep up in here in Auckland with the Blues organisation, where Murray Bolton bought in who was a corporate cabs guy, bought in 49% shares of the Blues, and from what I understand in the boardroom, had a real big say, or started to have an influence on what the coach at the time, John Coowan, was basically doing when it came to sort of recruiting players. And from what I'm led to believe, the Benji Marshall experiment was something that was driven by Murray Bolton, and we all know what an absolute disaster that was. Wonderful rugby league athlete, but he wasn't the answer to the issue at the time. And from what I understand, there were other decisions. In fact, there might have even been a bit to do in behind John Coowan's job as the actual coach at the time, and we all know as Paul shakes his head.
No, well,
so,
yeah, he did. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was definitely.
Yeah, so that once again, as you said before, John, sometimes that influence of money can send an organisation, excuse me, in the wrong direction. But we've also seen it with the Warriors. I'll cross code here a little bit, but I can remember when Tainui, who picked up a big paycheck with a lot of funding they got from the New Zealand government, and then they basically bankrolled it back into the Warriors. And once again, it went down a path which led the Warriors in the complete wrong direction. So, yeah, I take on board what you're saying. Be very, 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 very careful. We've spoken about how the pyramid effect in New Zealand rugby works, and it's as a really good friend of ours once said, New Zealand rugby at top level is like a deck of cards. And it hasn't, and at the moment its foundation that's got some issues at the moment. There's some quicksand in certain areas. So all that money you get to drive your top guys, all it basically does is how am I trying to put that? It paints a picture that looks rosy, but it's underneath where the foundation is really, really shaky.
And it raises something else. You talk about this guy buying in. When you bring these successful businessmen with lots of money into sport, again, you can open up a whole can of worms, because many of these businessmen are used to being large and in charge, right? They're used to making these decisions strategically, hiring, firing, setting, course, setting vision, doing all this kind of thing. And they're used to doing it very successfully, and they're used to winning, right? Then they come into a sports organization. Quite often, they come into a sports organization that is not doing well, right? That's why they're brought in. Or they buy, they're very seldom, if they're buying from another owner, buy a highly successful one, right? And then they think that they know the sport, but they know business. They don't know the sport. And then they get involved. And the most successful franchises around the world, when it comes to privately owned ones, when I say successful, I mean ones that win and win championships and appear in playoffs and appear in semifinals continually over and over the years. They have very wealthy owners who get out of the way and let people who know the sport run the franchise or run that particular club, whatever it may be. It's the ones that constantly are meddling that create an environment that very seldom is successful, right? The ones that are constantly thinking, you think that because they've got an MBA or because they're a fantastic entrepreneur, they know which coach they need to hire, right? Instead of getting a really good general manager who knows business and knows that particular sport, and then letting them do a proper search and finding the right coach. Right? They think, I know because I know how to do everything else.
Yeah, and we see that problem in the Viva Premiership, where you've got basically 12 owners and one members club. The 13 people who own the Gaelic Premiership, and you can see that they don't. That there are certain people in that one. Bruce Craig is one, for example, who, as far as he's concerned, his view is the one that should be carried, and that's the way they should be going, and doesn't like the fact that there are 12 or 11 other successful gentlemen who think the exact same as him and don't have the same opinion, and it doesn't work very well. Whereas you look at the NFL, where you've got they've got a situation where you've got a whole bunch of very successful businessmen who own each of the franchises, but when the commissioner says something, they all go, okay, yeah, he's made that decision, we will fall into line. Whereas in the Premiership, the equivalent guy can't make those decisions. He has to wait until he gets votes from all the people. And then even when they do vote and agree and supposedly agree something, you can still see some of them come out and disagree with it. And it doesn't help the organisation at all. one final thing is that I would say actually is the fact that we have AIG on the All Blacks jersey now shows that there is a price for these things in New Zealand rugby. So far, the things that have been sold, you could say, are acceptable, but there is a price. The question is just how big is that, and is someone willing to pay it? Would be my thought, unfortunately. So, should we talk about some rugby?
Yeah, I think we should, Paul, but I think we're almost halfway to 35 minutes in, so I think you should just give the Driving Maul a bit of a plug, man.
Oh, the halftime report. Oh, yes, the halftime report.
So, mate, yeah.
Yes, hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind Driving Maul. And down below, you'll find there's a link to become a supporter of Driving Maul on patreon.com/Driving Maul. There you'll get exclusive access to articles that I do, giving opinions and things. So why is Super Rugby so close this year, for example? And I'll be doing a video tomorrow looking at the exodus of players post-Rugby World Cup, and is it unusually high this year this round compared to, say, 4 years ago and 8 years ago. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. Also, you get an insight into Driving Maul as a kind of business. And I give you to let people know my monthly earnings from YouTube and that kind of stuff. So go click on that, help support the channel, please. There's even a tier that lets you get one of these hats. So you could be a proud owner of a Driving Maul bucket hat.
And if you make a big enough contribution, you can determine what we will discuss each week.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the only reason my video tomorrow is
birthday parties.
The only reason my video tomorrow is about the exodus of players is because one of my supporters asked me to talk about that. So absolutely, yes, I'm money driven, folks.
There we go. Just so what we're basically saying is we are purchasable, right?
And I'll safely say right now that I'm cheaper than an Aviva Premiership rugby team.
Correct. There we go. We are that shallow, Steve. We are that shallow.
No! Don't rep yourself. No, this is me that's that shallow. And I'll just,
yeah, well,
you guys just supporting me to be that shallow.
I didn't want to roll you under the bus, alone. I wanted to make sure Steve and I were there as well.
Dearie me.
You thought the Wallabies Rugby Union was cheap. You ain't seen us yet.
CVC, if you'd like to invest in us, you can do so for much less than.
All now we have operators standing by.
Dearie me. Yeah, pebaines@gmail.com if you want to email me with your offers to buy Driving Maul. It's up for sale for a good 8 figures. Any eight figure offers will be reviewed carefully. Mickey Mouse moment of the week. Did you have any funny moments during Super Rugby that you saw this weekend, Stephen?
Yeah, I did actually. It came from Friday night's game between the Jaguares and the Hurricanes. I actually saw 3 fly kicks in that game, where a Jaguares player had absolute plenty of time to rush forward, commit himself to the ball, and just decided, I'll fly kick it into anybody. And I think it ended up being turned over. And then I saw it again in the second half. It's just something you don't really see. The modern professional player, most of them, commit themselves to the ball. So I've really never seen that before. That was probably.
But that was at the kickoff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I haven't seen that for a very, very long time, if at all. Usually, maybe back in the, I don't know, maybe the under 10s and under 11 days, you'd have somebody who just didn't want to commit themselves and they'd just fly hack it, and that's what it was just crazy. There's a few other things in and around TMOs, but man, we'd need another show to discuss those guys.
First off, Steve, it's backline players that do that fly kick thing. Yeah. Right? It's fancy Dan backline players who don't want to get their hair messed up, that don't dive on the ball. Right? So let's be honest, those are the ones that come through swinging the boot rather than falling on. Any self-respecting would dive on the ball, right?
It was comical.
That was funny. And any from you, John?
Yeah, I was surprised, and excuse me, you guys have jogged my memory here. There was a try awarded where they did not go upstairs to check it, and it was very controversial. It was the Chiefs Blues game where there was a try awarded to the Blues that on review looked very dodgy, and the ref said, no need, carried on playing. A little bit later, there was a try awarded to the Chiefs. They did go up, they did reverse it. And I just thought, why the two standards? Why review the one and not the other? It just looks really bad.
Yeah, well, that's same TMO. Glenn Newman was the guy on the try you're talking about, is Alpha Tuangafasi, and whilst in the action of diving for the try, he actually lost control of the ball, and it actually touched the Chiefs player, so it's deemed a knock on, but he regained it again and then went over the line, but the try was given. And I know, sitting amongst a bar with Chiefs supporters, there was a little bit of disgruntlement, shall we say, and when the Gus Sawakula try wasn't given, Peter Sawakula, well, they call him Gus, there was I must admit, I was a little amazed. I didn't see any knock on, but obviously the TMO saw something that we all didn't see.
Well, the point is, it wasn't referred to the TMO, the first one. That's the worst part of it. You can go to the TMO, and I think we're starting to realize that TMO decisions themselves, just like they're discovered in cricket, you're not going to remove all controversy. There still can be sometimes some kind of, you think line decisions and you're going to have a definitive answer. And what we've discovered when it comes to going to replay is that you, even with replay, can have a difference of opinion. But when one gets referred and one doesn't, that's when it's really bad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's talk about that same game. Malai Nanai's try was also a bit questionable, and went up to the TMO, and he said, "I can see a grounding." And I'm like, "You can't see the ball anywhere. How can you see a grounding?"
Yeah,
I'm prepared to say, because I know that the TMOs at the ground are given a very large TV on high definition, and possibly when we're looking on our screens, even though they might be good TVs, we might not see the kind of granularity that they can. So I'm prepared to take, the fact that a TMO with his high def TV and his big, and he walks right up to it and he looks at it. But I'm prepared to say that he might have a different opinion to mine. But if one try is referred and one is not,
yep,
and both of them are iffy, and one is checked under high def and one is not, that's when it's really poor reffing.
Yeah, there was a crucial TMO decision in the Stormers Crusaders game on a forward pass. Now that was called from the TMO. He actually he messaged the referee basically saying there was a forward pass, where the process probably should have been to the referee. Can we look at that part? Can we look at that last pass and discuss? I must admit, when I looked at it, it looks back out of the hand, but it's floated forward. The touchy didn't appear to pick it up, and of course nor did the referee, because he awarded the try. So I think the issue there, more than anything else, is the process more than anything else. I know that the TMO is copying a lot, but surely there should be a standard thing. If a TMO isn't unsure about something, in the referee's ear, hey, can we look at something? And then all three of them can make some sort of consultation. But I know what's getting up a lot of people's noses is Marius Jonker made a decision on his own, and you could just tell by even the referees, the Australian referee, even he had a look. Well, okay, it was almost a shrug. Okay, we'll go back for a scrum.
But again, remember, guys. First of all, what do we want? We want the right decision.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose. It's the right decision, right? I don't have an issue if somebody goes outside of protocol in a particular sport in order to get the right decision, right? Now, that's talking about the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. But if our desire is to have the correct decision made, I don't think it's that much of an issue. And we must also remember that a referee standing on the ground and looking all the way up to a big screen all the way over there, right? And if he goes, he's not right up against a high-def TV like the TMO is. Right? He's sitting at it, and the TV is sitting right in front of him, right here, like your screens are, and he's looking at high def. So he's not going to see the same, right? So he might shrug, but, that's what the TMO is there for. Right? And, if we had a little bit of post-match feedback from refs, where, if there was a bit more transparency and they could put this thing up on a big screen and draw a little circle and say, look here, this is why I made that decision, then a lot of this would all disappear, right? I saw this on my thing, and that would help tremendously. But we've got to remember that the ref that's on the field, when he calls something bleedingly obvious on the big screen, it's because it is absolutely obvious.
Yes, true.
Right? You know what I mean? And at the length of a rugby field, looking up at a big screen, he looks at this, I didn't see that. I was unsighted. We were all unsighted. We missed it, whatever. There's a flying fist. Oh, there was another one. That was another one. Who was it that, was it this week or last week? I think it was this week, where somebody threw a punch, only made contact with his forearm, and it was a penalty. Oh, it was last week. My apologies. I'm rehashing ancient history. It was the Chiefs Sharks game. That's right. Just where somebody threw a punch. One of the Chiefs players threw a punch in the argy-bargy and didn't connect, and it was just a penalty. And I thought, there we go. There's, I'm missing something.
Actually, you could also argue it was poor technique from Braden Eno, or maybe it highlighted a weakness that he doesn't pass well from right to left. Because
I thought you were about to say it shows a weakness in the fact that Braden Eno can't throw a punch. No.
No.
It needs to work on his left hook.
It actually showed when he made the pass. Whilst he was throwing it back, it almost technically it didn't look great. That's why I don't know. I'm sort of I'm 50-50 on it, but it was one of those ones that I suppose it could have gone either way, and that's what I felt about the Sawakula try. But when I looked at the offer Tuangafussy try, that was wrong. And listening to Leon McDonald say, listen, the Blues have had a lot of those decisions not go their way. It's not about that. Not about that at all. It's about getting things right. And I was actually quite impressed with Colin Cooper. He didn't lose his cool, but he just put the question out there, and I thought that was fair enough.
Let me ask you, Paul. I was watching a lot of games with somebody who plays club rugby. So he either starts in the second for the second team for a local club here, or is on the bench for the Prem team. And I was watching some of these games this weekend with him, and he kept on saying, "There's a forward pass," and it wasn't just pointing out; he was pointing all different teams. There's another forward pass. How? And he was just going again. That's a forward pass. There's another forward pass. How are these refs missing all these forward passes? Are you seeing the same thing, Paul?
I've definitely had people asking me from Europe who've sort of caught a Super Rugby game going, guys, have they given up on forward passes in Super Rugby? There's definitely that feeling that it isn't being policed at the moment. I really don't like the way it's policed currently. I think it should be if you throw the ball and someone catches a ball in front of where you threw it from, it's a forward pass. Now, the one at the weekend, he throws it before he crosses the halfway line. The guy is like 3 meters past the halfway line, then catches it. Now, you can say it came out of the back of his hands and there's physics involved and all this kind of stuff. Well, fine. If you want to basically throw it further backwards and make sure it goes backwards, solve this physics stuff. Let's just actually say a forward pass is when the ball goes forward, rather than going, it's out the back of the hands and floated, and make it more complicated than it really is. I think that's part of
the problem. A lot of these problems occur when the guy who's making the pass gets tackled. So in other words, if he carried on with his run and the other guy is behind him in the correct position and they both carried on running and he passed the ball to somebody behind him and then he carried on running and was still in front of that guy, the issue would be moot. But what happens is the guy's carrying the ball, he passes it before contact and he gets hit and suddenly he stops and the other guy carries on running and you lose that perspective. Whereas if he passed it before contact and the tackler pulled out and he carried on running to support, then it doesn't become an issue. This is the problem. But I like what you're saying. We should be more definite in the fact that we're passing backwards, because what's going to happen is we're going to be playing in a World Cup knockout game and we're going to be playing with the Northern Hemisphere ref, and suddenly we're going to look for all these forward passes and everyone's going to say, what's going on here? But that's because they haven't been pulled up, right?
Oh, sorry. So I thought you were going to go the other way, and you're going to say you're going to refer back to Barnes back in.
No. I think there was a genuine mistake, because that brings my other thing is, could the reason be that Super Rugby now is being played faster and faster and faster? It's certainly, I mean, the game between the Lions and the Highlanders, yes, wonderful high felt weather, warm, at altitude, hard field, but it in some ways it looks like almost a different game to what's been played in the Northern Hemisphere, right? It's so much quicker. It is so much quicker. There are so many more passes in any game, right? And offloads, and they're taking on the advantage line flat, and the first five or fly half is hitting, and there's offloads right in contact happening, bang, 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 bang. Could it be that the refs are just, they're not catching them because it's happening so quickly? Could that be it?
There's possibly an element of that, but I think there's also been this whole thing that it used to be you had to pass the ball backwards, then it was you can pass the ball flat, then it comes out the hands backwards, and the referees have to be so sure that it's a forward pass before they actually call it, that I think that now basically as long as it's flattish, and even the commentators have gone, oh, that's a flat pass. Sorry, guys. No, what you mean is, that's a mile forward, but I'll call it flat because it sounds better. But
we could do some better commentating. We could do with some. I
was about to say, guys, the question that does my head in is the clear and obvious one. See, that sort of opens itself up again to interpretation, because a number of times I've heard that question asked and it's looked forward. And the answer has been, oh no, it wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, it was forward, but they've just gone with it and called it a try. I think that if there's any doubt, it's a forward pass.
Yeah, spoken like a rugby player.
And talking about the talking about the pace of talking about the pace of the game. It was interesting to listen to an interview of a guy who'd played for the Chiefs at Lock and then moved up north to Leicester, I think he was. And he said, look, at the end of the day, there's only so many hours a week you can train. And that basically what you've got in New Zealand, he said, is basically we train like 60-40 on attack, 60% on attack, 40% on defence. Whereas when you actually get up to the Northern Hemisphere, they spend 60% of the time training defence and 40% training attack. And that change of emphasis of how you train, the balance of training, is that does change what pace the game's going to be played at. So if you're training more on attack than defence, it's going to be a quicker game. But if you're training more on defence and it's all about that line speed, then you're so knackered from doing that line speed you can't do anything else. You can't be as fast in attack. So I think there's an element of that involved.
This is where, and hand on heart, and my first allegiance is to the Springboks, because that's how my dad raised me. But this is where rugby owes a huge debt of gratitude to the All Blacks, is that they have proven in the last 10 years that attacking ball in hand rugby wins World Cups.
Yep.
And if they had not proven that, the whole sport would have suffered. If the a Clive Woodward style of 2003 had proven to be continually successful in winning World Cups, it would have been the worst possible outcomes so far as playing style goes for the sport.
And also risk-taking. And we saw that at the weekend with one of those Mickey Mouse moments with Richard Mwanga's kick that deflected, went sideways, Havili collected it and went in to score. They're allowed to try things. They're allowed to make mistakes. Whereas the 2003 thing is about, no mistakes, and let's control everything. And my final Mickey Mouse moment of the week, did you see the Papier's pass between Genya's legs? He nutmegged it?
No.
Yes.
At the breakdown, Genya's well offside. Gets called offside, then and Papier passes it straight between his legs to the fly half, which was a fantastic piece of skill.
Yes, it was brilliant. Oh, and you've raised something that gets my goat so badly. Is how guys will be offside, hands on the ball, illegally, in the ruck, obstructing, slowing down the ball, and the ref will say, let it go, no, you're offside. The guy will let go, the referee won't blow him up, and the ball has been slowed down. So he's infringed, he's in the process of infringing, he gets warned, he stops infringing, the referee doesn't penalise, but as a result, the ball is slow and attack is affected. But he's done exactly what he's... And they all do. It's not their fault. This is a refereeing problem. They're doing exactly how I would coach them to do. Especially the open siders and the loose forwards. I'd say, get your hands on the ball. Get your hands on the ball and look at the ref, like a naughty boy. Like, can I have this ice cream?
Yeah.
Can I have another ice cream?
Ask the ref the question, and he'll answer you. Yeah.
Well,
yes, can I have this ice cream all the time? All that 1,000 or 1,000, 2003, your defense is forming up. And I'm looking at can I? Okay, sorry.
The other one is the deliberate knockdown on advantage that then gets scored as a try. That would be a yellow card normally, but isn't a yellow card because they scored the try. It's like, hang on, no, it's either a yellow card or not.
Yes. What were you going to say, Steve?
I was going to say, World Rugby apparently have sent a directive out to referees that they can talk to the players, but penalise them only if they feel it has an impact on what's happening on the resulting play, which just opens the door for more interpretation. But from what I understand, they're not entirely happy with Super Rugby at the moment. We've seen many examples of. I think we can refer back to the Chiefs Blues game in the first round where Brodie Retallick was asked on 3 or 4 occasions to stop holding the ball on the ground. Just penalise him. It was crazy, and it's continued throughout the whole season. Hey guys, I know we haven't got much time left. I know Paul was going to briefly touch on how this was going to basically play out for the rest of the season.
Not this week.
Not this week. We've just run out of time. Well, just let me say, I think the Crusaders, you can definitely tick a box. The Hurricanes, you can pretty much tick their box. I'm liking to look at the balls at the moment. I reckon it was a great bounce back from them on the weekend. They played some really, really good code. I think. Listen, I'll chuck the Hagawaris in there, the Sharks in there.
Yeah. The Hagawaris are a real threat. Yeah.
Big game this weekend, which could determine the fate of both the Highlanders and the Stormers. The Highlanders playing the Stormers in Cape Town. I think that's going to be a real big ask for the Highlanders. I think the Stormers would have got a lot of
big point there. The Highlanders
have
got 3 games left, whereas just about everyone that they're competing against has got 4 games left. So they've got one less to get. They've played one more game than everyone else around them.
Yeah. So
how good was that? I was going to say, how good was that crowd at Newlands?
Oh, superb. I mean, to say you saw that great, those great images, and then you saw the images of the Highlanders Lions game where basically nobody was there. What is that all about, John?
Well, and the same for the Blues Chiefs game was terrible. The attendance was terrible, and then you see that game at Newlands, and you remember that's what Super Rugby used to be like. You used to see stadiums like that, right? That's all about the fact that the Crusaders have a huge support base in Cape Town, and they came out to support the Crusaders, just like the All Blacks do. I mean, if I was South African rugby, I would never give an All Black Test match to Cape Town. Never. Not for a good 20, 30 years, right? Because you're losing a lot of your home crowd advantage, right? Because there's such a strong supporter base there for the All Blacks and the Crusaders. But yeah, that's really what drove it. Huge interest, and then once all of the Crusaders fans in Cape Town started coming out, then there was a response from the Stormers fans saying we're not going to be outnumbered, and it's a bit to and fro, which is great. That's what you want,
John, just before I sign off, one good piece of news for South African supporters. We could see there is a likelihood we could see maybe 3 or even 4 South African teams make the top 8.
Yep. That's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be a real dogfight because I think the Jaguares are at the moment the strongest team. They just are playing really good rugby. I think the Lions are possibly the best coached team, but they don't have the same level of talent as the Jaguares. I think the Sharks possibly have the most talented, when it comes to player for player, the most talented athletes in the entire competition, but their coaching is diabolical. And the Bulls are just a little bit schizophrenic, right? They can really turn up one day, and another day they just seem to fall apart. So there's a huge dogfight taking place in that, and it might be a little bit of cannibalization, and that the fight that happens in that group it might be, as you say, 3 or 4 teams go through. It might be that they knock each other out and then it's only one.
But I mean, the problem for the Bulls is they've got the Brumbies away, the Blues away, the Highlanders away before they go back to play the Lions at home. And they've only won 1 game. Last weekend was the first time they'd won overseas since 2015 or something, or earlier.
Yep. Yep.
So they've got a tough series of games, 3 more on the road to come. For them.
That's why I don't think they're a huge threat. That's their problem. They've got backline issues. They've got cohesion issues in their backline. They've got great pack of forwards, but not great so far as the tight forwards are concerned, but not great loose forwards, except of course for Dwayne Vermeulen. So just their weaknesses there, and they're going to be decimated after the World Cup when it comes to losing players.
Yeah, well, you've got the big players like the Lions don't have to leave South Africa again. They've got the Sharks away, Stormers at home, Hurricanes at home, and the Bulls away. And the Jaguares got the Waratahs and Reds on the road, which is not the hardest ones to play, let's be honest, before they get the Sharks and the Sunwolves at home. So, yeah, there's definitely some easier run-ins than the Bulls.
Yes, and remember the Lions, if they play away at the Bulls, that's closer than Auckland and Hamilton, right? It's 90 kilometers apart, less, probably 70 kilometers apart. So yeah, that's hardly an away game for them.
That's the closest. That's the closest derby in Super Rugby.
That's right.
But this weekend, boys, do you have a favourite game this weekend? We have the Chiefs versus the Reds, which is 2 teams that are really scrambling it out. Brumbies versus the Bulls, that could be a really interesting one. Top of the Australia Conference versus top of the Africa Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Sunwolves Rebels, that should be a fairly comfortable one. Crusaders Blues.
Sorry, say that again. What did you? The Sunwolves Rebels. Sorry, just does. Sorry.
That should be a fairly. The Rebels should be.
Oh, go on.
Well, I mean, I got 0 out of 6 last weekend on my predictions, so this is I'm just giving up. I've just lost all faith in myself.
Okay.
Crusaders.
What
Blues.
else is playing? Crusaders Blues.
Yep.
Now that's going to be like clubbing baby seals.
Yep.
Well, it depends what the Crusaders. If the Crusaders get distracted by their off-field issues, they
won't.
They won't. They shouldn't do. Waratahs, Jaguares. That's Stormers, Highlanders, and then the Sharks versus the Lions. Now, I found that Sharks Lions one really hard to call. As you say, the most talented side against the best coach side in Africa. So that one, who knows?
That's going to be a good game. Well, it has potential to be a good game. So does, you mentioned it, the Highlanders Stormers game. Could be a good one. Where are the Waratahs playing the Jaguares?
In Sydney.
In Sydney.
In Sydney. I think the Waratahs are very affected by what's happening with Folau, the whole Folau issue. And I think the Jaguares could be ripe to pull off a away victory there. And that would really put them in the pound seats when it comes to the log.
Yeah, Waratahs are actually favourites on the TAB for that particular game. And the Crusaders are paying $1.17 to beat the Baby Seals. We're at $4.90.
Sorry, Steve, who's playing the Baby Seals?
The Crusaders.
Oh, yes, the Baby Seals.
Those guys.
That's right.
So there we go.
We're in Christchurch.
Down in Christchurch, yes.
Oh, man. They're going to come out with a hammer in each hand, hobnail boots. They're going to be going at all four appendages at once. It's going to be golly. No,
oh, dear. So there we go.
Going to be
I think the Blues and the Reds got the two most boring names in Super Rugby. So perhaps now we have a new name for the Blues. It's the Auckland Baby Seals.
Yeah.
The Auckland Baby Seals. That's a good one. I like that.
Bluesers.
The Bluesers. Oh dear, no. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure yet again. So not this weekend, but next weekend for the Chiefs versus the Crusaders. So the adult Seals and the Crusaders when they face each other in Fiji. I will be in the Zone Sports Bar with Minty, who is the radio sport commentator for Waikato. So the two of us will be in the Zone Sports Bar in 2 weekends' time. I believe both you boys are away, busy doing things. So safe travels to both of you, and thank everyone who's joined us, especially in the live chat. It has been be good fun. Don't forget, subscribe up there, become a member down there. Over there are 2 videos that the artificial intelligence here at YouTube says you'll enjoy. So click on those, and see you all. Actually, I'm going to take a night off tomorrow night because there isn't that much All Blacks news. I'll be back on Thursday with Ryan previewing all the Super Rugby games as we have the lineups for them by then. So good night.
Oh, great. I get the night off tomorrow night. Yay.